You know, a lot of people, in order to get rid of their own guilt, they will try to minimize the significance of slavery and Jim Crow. They'll say things like, well, I wasn't there. That was a long time ago. You weren't there. Why are you upset about it? Other people were enslaved too. Other people were treated badly. So why are you whining about it? So there are all types of excuses and things people say now to minimize the significance of African American slavery and Jim Crow.
The one thing that makes me mad is when people say it's not that bad. It's like me kicking you in your teeth, and I'm the one saying it's not that bad, and you got kicked in the mouth.
It doesn't matter whether you were around during slavery. It doesn't matter if your ancestors owned them or not. What matters is this: you benefit today from the enslavement of African people. And everyone who looks like you benefits in some way, shape, or form from the accrual of resources, of wealth, and of financial status that was reaped on the backs of my ancestors.
A common narrative now is that black people shouldn't be upset because Africans enslaved other Africans, and there are a lot of holes in that theory. The thing is, there is no type of comparative slavery coming out of Africa. African people never had a slave-based economy. African people in Africa never had a shipbuilding economy based on slavery. They never had an insurance economy based on slavery.
Slavery had a different cut to it in Africa. European slavery is the slavery that is the unforgivable slavery. It's the most vicious.
When blacks sold other blacks into slavery, they thought it was the kind of slavery that they had, where you had to maybe work in the field, your family had to live over here on the side, you couldn't live here, your children had to go to school after my children. It was things like that. They had no idea it would be the kind of terror that was put upon us here in America, and they didn't come over here and go back and tell. And so they just were able to just keep shipping people through that system.
During the European slave trade in Africa, there were some Africans who complied with the Europeans because basically when the Europeans went into Africa, they gave them an ultimatum. Look, we have these advanced weapons. Either you're going to be our slaves or you're going to help us make them our slaves. So you make a choice. So a lot of people were forced to comply with the Europeans.
Three things make American slavery different and black oppression different from everybody else's. Number one, it was a process of dehumanization. No other slave in world history was dehumanized, prevented from identifying as a human being. Nobody else. We are the only people in world history who have ever been dehumanized. Number two, your inability to learn was codified as a federal crime. Nowhere in history were slaves not allowed to learn, ever. You could be killed reading a book. You have never seen that in world history. And number three, it's the only oppression where the whole world benefited. Everybody benefited from the enslavement of African people, and nobody did nothing about it. That makes your predicament different. So no matter how much we want to join ranks with the Latinos and the Asians and the Arabs, you have nothing in common with them. In fact, you need to be careful, because just like with the civil rights movement, they will use you again for your numerical strength and then abandon you at your time of need.
They're always trying to find a comparative form of slavery coming out of Africa, and the slavery there, the servitude there, was much different than European servitude. There's a book by an African gentleman. It was the first time an African who was captured in Africa and brought over to the New World. This was the first time he got to tell his story from his own perspective. A guy named Olaudah Equiano had a book that was a bestseller in the 1700s, and he talked about the difference of being enslaved in Africa and being in servitude in Africa and Europe. He talked about when he was in servitude in Africa, the people, the Africans who had him in servitude, they treated him like an extended family member. They treated him with a certain level of humanity and dignity. And he said once he got to the European slave ships, their slavery was something totally different. He'd never been beaten before. They were beating them. People were getting raped on the ship. So he specifically stated how barbaric the European slavery was as compared to the African servitude.
We have people today who deny that the history itself is even relevant to who we are as a nation of people and to what America represents in the world. There's no America without slavery. There's no economic dominance. There is no greatest American century without the capital produced by the work of black people in this nation. Point of fact.
A lot of historians now will try to make it seem like slavery was just this stain on the fabric of America. But in reality, slavery was the fabric of America. Cotton was king. Slavery was the #1 game in town. Let's not get it twisted.
The special kind of slavery that we enacted in America had never been enacted before. And that is to say that not only are you my slave, but your children will be my slave.